Yes. I got you. You ready? I'm ready. Yes, sir. We'll call this meeting of the Craven County Board of Commissioners regular session for Monday, May the 1st, 2023 to order. Madam Clerk, if you will, please call the roll.
Commissioner Mitchell?
Here.
Commissioner Smith?
Here.
Commissioner Howard?
Here.
Commissioner Hunt?
Here.
Commissioner Mark?
Here.
Vice Chairman Booker?
Here.
Chairman Jones?
Here. Ladies and gentlemen, I would ask, if you will, please let's stand together as Mr. Grady will lead us in prayer. Then I ask you to remain standing for our Pledge of Allegiance to the American flag.
Bless us, O Lord, our lawmakers, our country, our county, and each one of us as we lift our prayers to you. Bless us and keep us that our walk this day would be blameless in your sight. Guard us and guide us wherever we are called to serve today, in our offices, in our communities, or in our homes, that we would be eager to respond to you with our whole being. Would that we seek to live upright lives and keep your laws. And when our steps go wayward and our thoughts are overcome by selfish intent, do not forsake us, but call us back, that we would once again desire to live according to the righteousness you set before us. May your judgment upon us today find us without fault or flaw, and may our praise to you this day and always be steadfast and shameless. In the strength of your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We welcome each of you here this evening to the Board of Commissioners meeting, which is your meeting, and to those that may be viewing online, we also welcome you. I would ask for those that are in attendance this evening to please make sure that our cell phones are on silenced, so they would not disrupt this meeting. We would appreciate it. Commissioners, before we approve the agenda, there are two items that I asked for that we would make corrections on. Item 3, the Crime Stoppers presentation, I'm going to ask that it be pulled from the agenda this evening. They would like to defer to a later time. And also I'm going to ask that between items 6 and 7, that we would have a 10-minute recess for those of our guests who are here this evening, to give them the opportunity. I know they have other things to attend to, some of our educators, to be able to get back to their homes. So, are there any other agenda changes, items that you desire to pull or add?
Make a motion to approve the agenda as is.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the agenda with necessary changes and corrections. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hear no discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed. First item is the petition of citizens for agenda topics. Mr. Vice Chair, do we have any?
We do not.
No one signed up for agenda topics, okay? We'll go to item 2, which is the consent agenda. You have under the consent agenda the April 17th, 2023 regular session minutes, tax releases and refunds, and you also have an increase in the dental funding budget amendment for the health department. Are there any consent agenda items you desire to pull this evening?
Mr. Chairman, so moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hear none, Madam Clerk, if you will, please call the roll.
Commissioner Mitchell?
Yes.
Commissioner Smith?
Yes.
Commissioner Howard?
Yes.
Commissioner Hunt?
Yes.
Commissioner Mark?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Booker?
Yes.
Chairman Jones?
Yes, thank you. The next item is the Board of Education budget presentation, and this evening we are honored to have members of our Board of Education here. I will allow you that opportunity, Superintendent, if you want to introduce them and your staff, so welcome.
Thank you so much for having us tonight. I do have 4 board members here, if you guys would like to stand up, and Mr. Scott Murphy, Mr. Brent Manning, Mr. Carl Pop, Ms. Kelly Muse, our Craven County board members, and I'm presenting, but this is really all of our budgets as we work together to make our school system and our community a great place to learn and work and live. I do have several staff members that are standing by for questions. I have Mr. Stacy Lee with me, and I'm trying to see any other staff cabinet members here. And Jennifer Wagner, Public Relations, is here. And of course, Ms. Denise Altman will be presenting lots of the numbers to you tonight. So we do have a presentation. And I will start off again thanking you for allowing us to present our budget to you this evening. We're in constant communication to ensure the best use of money provided for Craven County Schools. Tonight you will see how your money is making a difference in our school system and in the communities we serve. Thank you to the staff and the Board of Education members who are here supporting us tonight. Next slide. Before Ms. Altman presents the actual budget request, I'd like to share some of the celebrations we have due to the ongoing support from our commissioners. I hope you can see the benefits of the support in the next few slides. The next slide talks about some of the academic celebrations we have. Next slide, there you go. Craven County School System in 1 year moved up 10 places in our state ranking based on student performance. The ranking is based on all EOGs and EOCs, K-12, and is compared to all other districts in the state of North Carolina. While this is a celebration, we still have work to do. We want to be in the top 20 school systems in the state. You'll see that 6 of our elementary schools ranked in the top 20% for academic growth in the entire state. This ranking is based on improvement in student performance in 1 year. This is 40% of our elementary schools ranking in the top 20% of our state. 4 of our 6 high schools were above the state average of 86.4 for a cohort graduation rate. 4 of our 6 high schools were above the state average of 86.4 for the high school graduation rate. 85% of our schools, 22 of 26, met or exceeded growth last year. That is 38% of our schools exceeded expected growth and 46% met growth based on last year's results. The next slide will show you that 65% of our schools earned a letter C or better on their performance. Grade level proficiency for math increased by 12.8%, again in 1 year. Grade level proficiency in science, and this is a big one, especially in our community, 55.1% increase in our science scores in 1 year. Craven Early College and Early College East were above the state average in ACT scores, which is used for college admission standards. The combined indicator of ACT and ACT work keys was 60.5%. The next slide will show some celebrations regarding our student and staff. The class of 2022 earned over $14.7 million in scholarships. Of course, we all know that the New Bern High School is home of the state championship football team. But I must say, we are students first, student athletes. New Bern High School drill team placed 7th in the nation. Numerous band and indoor guard teams from our high schools received multiple honors across the state. 2 of our students were finalists for Military Child of the Year. Craven County Schools is also home to both the Southeast Teacher of the Year and Southeast Principal of the Year, Laura Wilson and Ashley Falconberry. Jason Griffin was selected to receive the Federal Program Leadership Award for the state of North Carolina. And W.J. Gergaina students were selected to sing at DPI during Music in Our Schools Month. So you will see not only performance in the classroom, but outside of the classroom, our students are excelling. On the next slide, I'd like to talk some about our facilities. Through the use of federal funds and ESSER funding, we were able to address several capital projects. While some funding we have received have strict guidelines on their usage, we have used every dollar we could to address our facility needs. We continue to seek ways to update our facilities and are currently planning to revisit our capital plan with the school board and revise or edit the plan based on any changes and current needs. While our ADM has remained constant for the last few years and stable, our students live in different locations, and we all know that is because of the challenge of the availability of housing. This will impact how we address our plan, but our plan remains constant. We are also aware, as many of you are, that not only did materials increase, labor charges have really increased to implement our plan.
But we have partners reaching out to us, such as the base, that are willing to help fund shovel-ready projects, which will also impact the progress of our plan. We will continue to work with the commissioners and others to ensure we're able to address our facility needs. So here's some of the celebrations we have. Through ESSER and grant funding, we have been able to fund the following projects. ESSER HAVVAC projects in excess of $19 million. ESSER purchase of K-5 iPads, $2.9 million. We have increased our match to have an SRO in every building, $86,000. Increased amount of our standard SRO contracts, $144,000. So some of the projects we have funded include HAVVAC upgrades in multiple sites, phone and intercom upgrades, safety and security updates to include cameras, doors, and locks. We've updated fire doors at New Bern High School. We've installed fencing at James Smith, Roger Bell New Tech Academy, W.J. Gerganis, and J.T. Barber. And we have multiple schools that have had whole school painting projects. The next slide will show the celebration for our districts and schools. For the second year in a row, Craven County Schools was recognized as a Purple Star District, honoring our commitment to our military families. We have a nurse, and our commitment is to keep a nurse in every one of our buildings. We have at least one SRO in every school. The DARE program is now offered in 14 of our elementary schools. New Bern High School was designated as a national demonstration site for AVID. Vanceboro Farm Life was recognized as a national lighthouse school for the Leader in Me program. Our Public Relations Department received 5 Blue Ribbon Awards for outstanding communication and telling our story. So thanks to the support of the commissioners and our community, we are able to, next slide, help students find their passion, and in the next slide, recruit and retain passionate and high-quality educators, and finally, to help our students make connections both in and outside of the classroom. Now, Ms. Denise Altman will present our local budget expense and capital outlay budget for you.
Good evening.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm short, sorry. Thank you for the opportunity to present our budget request to you tonight. Go to the next slide, please. I'm going to start with an overview of current budget considerations that we took into account as we were building this budget. First of all, we have state planning allotments that we received from the state, but we do not have finalized rates for retirement or health insurance yet. So we are working with estimates. Excuse me. We proposed estimates of 25.71% for retirement and $7,932 for health insurance. These are estimates that we created in-house based on the last 2 years' average increases, just to give us a starting point for next year's benefit costs. We don't yet know the state raise amounts. We've seen the one version of the budget that has passed. They are still working on the second version, and then there will be the whole committee that comes together and comes out with the final version of the budget. But for now, we projected our local current expense budget with 3% salary increases from the state. We did receive a reduction in our PRC 001 classroom teacher allotment of 4 positions. Our ADM is down roughly about 100 students, so that would affect it by about 4 teaching positions. Our state PRC 031 low wealth planning allotment, initially we received notification from DPI that allocation was going to be reduced by almost $900,000. And it took several weeks and a lot of phone calls, and finally we received notification last week of a revised allotment. So we are still losing funding, about $243,000, but it's much less than that initial amount that we received, and we're thankful for that. So just to provide you that update, that will change a few things later, and I will explain them as I go through them. Another consideration that we had to take into account is our North Carolina DHHS nursing grant ends June 30th, and that grant has been paying for several of our nursing positions. Next slide, please. So again, as we were building our budget, we had some revenue adjustments. These are somewhat related to House Bill 219. Several sources of revenue that we receive have been moved from Fund 2 to Fund 8 to protect those from being shared. We're happy to answer that. And we'll be looking at using those funds as well next year. As everybody knows, ESSER funds end in September of 2024. So we'll be looking at what programs and things that have been secured through ESSER funds need to be continued. And some of that local current expense fund balance will be needed to help sustain some of those programs. Okay, next slide. So let's look at the increased costs in the local current expense budget. Some of the expenditure adjustments for fiscal year 23-24, we had added 7 teaching positions to local 001. This was to absorb the reduction of the 4 positions that I mentioned earlier from the state. And it was also to take up some of the decrease that was originally projected in low wealth. But since we did receive an adjusted allotment for low wealth, we can put those 3 teaching positions back in low wealth and reduce that allocation. So we will make that adjustment in July, and that will basically just adjust the total amount we have to allocate from fund balance. We did add money this year for our school bookkeepers, for travel reimbursements, for daily bank deposits. In the past, our school bookkeepers would travel to the bank as part of their afternoon work schedule. So they leave work 15 minutes early, go by the bank, drop their deposits, because the state requires them to make a daily deposit if they collect over $250, which is, for especially high school and middle schools, almost a daily thing. And they were not reimbursed for that mileage. And typically, the bookkeepers lived close enough to the school that it was on their way home. In the last few years, we have more and more bookkeepers that don't necessarily work in their neighborhoods. And so to provide them travel reimbursement to take the afternoon bank deposits, we've added $18,000 to the budget for next year because we have a bookkeeper at every school. So we're trying to help them with the cost of gas and things as part of their afternoon daily bank run. We did also add 4 clerical positions to local 003 that could no longer be paid from low wealth funding due to that reduction. Initially we moved 9 nursing positions into local 004. With the low wealth money coming back up and only having the $200,000 reduction, we can now move those positions back and they can be paid again from the low wealth funds. We added a 0.5% increase to our instructional supplement for our teachers and our instructional support staff. So that will bring us up to 10.5% instructional supplement for Craven County staff. We also added 4 new grant-funded SRO positions that require a local match of $18,333 each. We added 1 additional tech position for the technology department and an additional plumber position for the facilities maintenance department. We had 1 plumber for 26 buildings, so he was a very busy man and he needed some help. We also added $62,500 for additional SRO support at athletic events. We've seen the need for additional security at middle school and high school sporting events. So there's a schedule of all of the sporting events for next fiscal year, and we've estimated the amount of time and how many officers would need to be at each event so that we could project this amount. We also added funding for an additional 504 contract module in Power School and fee cost for subs in all areas of the budget. We have increased costs for professional development for our music and art teachers. And we are working on an implementation of Link software, a new ERP format that the state has kind of asked us all to move towards, the School Business Modernization Program. And it's a major undertaking. We also have a potential increase to our charter school expenses, and that's dependent upon enrollment because we'll have a new charter school in Craven County soon. And then the CVA lease, since ESSER funding that can pay for that lease actually ends in September of this year, ESSER 2, we will be paying the remaining 9 months of that lease from local funds for this coming school year. Next slide. This next section is the capital outlay request. And this was the part that I mentioned. We are asking for a little additional funding. It's roughly $93,021. If you look at the projects there, the two largest projects are the the track resurfacing at Havelock High School and West Craven High School. And those are fairly large dollar amount projects, but they are very, very needed. We've not been able to have track meets at those schools for some time now. So the Category 1 total there is $1 million. And then if you go down on the next slide, you'll see the majority of the improvements in Category 2 are intercom upgrades at the schools listed. And then the final item in the capital budget is the 4th year of the iPad equipment lease. So the grand total for all the capital projects is $2,095,475, and that's roughly a $93,000 increase. So in summary, on the last slide, we are requesting the same county appropriation for fiscal year 23-24 in our local current expense budget, and we're asking for a small increase in capital outlay. We are also allocating $5,549,000 of our fund balance for local current expense budget. And what questions can I answer for you?
All right, commissioners, questions?
Mr. Chairman,
Sir, Commissioner Mark.
in the budget, you mentioned that you had 17 million in reserves, and you used 4 million to budget the balance the budget. Since 2011, you had 17,000 children in school, and now you got 13,000 children in school. And in some 4 years ago, I had asked that we cut out some schools, and a plan was put before the commissioners to cut 4 schools. Since that time, we haven't cut 1 school. I find this very hard to believe. I think that more emphasis should have been on closing the schools. You argue that the IED, which is special needs children, there are problems in there as far as a teacher having an increase in the time that she spends in the classroom. It would seem to me that if we had 1 school for special needs children, that we wouldn't have that problem. That's all I have to say right now.
Can I respond?
Yes, ma'am.
And I agree that the plan has been around for some time, and I have board members here that can give me the nod, but I know our board, we had a change in our board in December, and they're committed to looking at our facility plan. I think the plan is not outdated, the cost may be, and certainly some of the locations where our students live. And I think they have a plan this coming year to address that and look at closing several schools and looking at where our students attend. So that conversation has started with the board, and I think that they're committed to doing that.
That's fine, but I had that conversation 4 years ago. Another thing I can see here is you're taking out of 17 million, you're bringing up 4 million to balance the budget. You're asking the county to come up with $373,000 plus $92,000 to go into the capital needs. If you have that much money in your budget, I don't see why you're asking the county for anything.
Well, and if I can address that. We anticipate taking more out of fund balance next year as well, because as Ms. Altman said, the ESSER money will be gone, and to sustain social workers, nurses, all of the things we're committed to providing for our students now more than ever, we intend to take more money out of that budget. We're getting to that. We have conversations almost monthly with Chair of Commissioners and Chairman of the Board of Education to determine where that best number is, to keep us where, in case of a serious event, we would have money and not have to come to the county, trying to determine what that number is. And also, much of our funding from the state budget sometimes only drops in February, and a lot of that is for our EC teachers to be paid. And if we don't have a little bit of fund balance that we float to pay those folks out, my fear would be in December and January, we would not be able to pay our folks. So again, we're trying to spend down that balance. Much of that this year rolled over because of the money that we thought we were going to have to send back. They said, keep it. So we had to put it in the fund balance. But our commitment is to continue to use that money in the best way we can.
Okay, I understand that the money is held back from the state to you. However, you still have $14 million. And I don't think the amount that the state was going to give you would come up to that amount.
We're going to take 5 out of it.
Neither. That's it, Mr. Chairman.
Other comments?
I have a question.
Commissioner Hunt.
Are you losing any nurses? Okay, so we're keeping all the nurses, 1 nurse in each school. And are we losing any teachers this year?
As far as like losing teaching positions or?
Positions.
The allocation for this year's teachers is actually the same exact number as what we had last year, even though they're at different schools. They're redistributed based on where the population is. The total school teachers that are allocated based on our students is literally the same number as last year. So when we worked up the teacher allotments for each school and looked at last year in comparison to this year, some schools were losing and some schools were gaining, but in total they were the same.
Okay. And social workers? How many social workers do you have?
6.
Yes.
6.
So we're duplicating something that another department's providing.
As far as what?
Social workers.
We don't have any other social workers. We have counselors and school psychologists, but we don't have other social workers at
Okay.
the school.
The county does.
I see
Yeah.
what you're saying.
So right now, as far as children's mental health needs, you have counselors, social workers, and you said clinical psychologists?
We have 7 psychologists, but most of them work with the EC population.
testing.
Yes, ma'am. For testing. They're not like in the schools regularly. They're not assigned to the regular ed students as much as they are to testing for EC purposes. If that makes sense.
They serve more for testing than like therapists.
Yes, ma'am.
That's all I have.
Okay. Commissioner Mitchell.
And thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to return back to what Commissioner Marks said. I know consolidating the school district is a huge, painful, difficult, controversial task. I also know it needs to be done. And I'm like him, nobody counted on Florence and COVID, and I got that. Life interfered. But my question is, on what date are we going to hear a proposal to start consolidating and closing schools? Because there's nothing like a deadline to drive a project.
Well, and I talked with the board chair this evening, and I think his plan is to bring this before the board, and that you will see some action this year of a planning to.
December 31st or 1 August, there's a big difference.
Yeah, so we're having lots of conversations.
Hey, Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
If you don't mind.
I hate to speak for the board,
I
but
know,
you
yes,
know what I'm
ma'am, and
saying, so.
Yeah. So thank you, and thank you for allowing us to be here tonight and present. Lots of great conversation amongst our board in this area. Of course, just kind of coming in and jumping in and getting involved, but certainly see the need and hear the need. And I can tell you our board is a committed board to work hard and to work a plan up. At this moment in time, I would just say that we're having those conversations and we're looking forward to bringing something, but I don't want to prematurely speak and share anything at this moment, if that's okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Vice Chair Booth.
At the risk of being redundant, there are 4 of us here who have been here for almost 5 years. And there are 3 newer members of our board. And those have been here for almost 5 years. And I just say, I understand where you're at and where you're at. And Kelly, you're relatively new to the board. Cara, you're an old timer. For 5 years now, we've made this point. And so I just want to just reiterate, we got 2 people said it, I'm saying it again. If we sit here a year from now and we hear a new budget, and we haven't had a plan, I mean, that's a year. Okay? I'm not speaking for the rest of them, but I believe that we won't be thrilled a year from now if we haven't had some action. And you can take that however you want, but we need to see it. And when we're talking 4,000 less students, ballpark, I don't know if that's exactly right, but somewhere in that neighborhood, you're saying no?
I think it's more like 2,500, but I'm trying to remember, when I first started working for Craven County Schools, we were roughly 15,000, and now we're at 12,500.
Okay, the number I heard was 16, but.
Well, I go back further than she
Yeah,
does.
Some of us are old.
Just before me.
So, at any rate, it's a large number. And so, Mr. Chair, I just hope that we can put some real heat on the board to make sure something happens. Okay? Thank you.
All right. Ms. B.
I'm not disagreeing with anything that's been said, but having been on the board, I do recall us having this discussion, and during that time, the state changed the number of students that could be in the classroom, which made a difference as well. So we have to consider all these changes, all these possibilities, rules and laws. And so I do understand that. I'm not saying that we don't need to have some action, but I'm saying there are circumstances that I do understand that have caused some of the delays. And while I'm speaking, I would note that you, Wendy, said that there were 6 high schools, and I don't count the 6.
We have the 3 traditional
Correct.
early colleges and Craven Virtual Academy.
Oh, the virtual academy, okay. And that's a high school as well. Thank you.
Well, it's 3rd grade through high school.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Commissioner Howard.
Thank you, Chairman. One of the advances we have had is the J.T. Barber situation. Is that concrete now? How's that? I mean, that is moving in the right direction, correct?
Well, and Commissioner Mitchell brings up an interesting point when you start talking about closing schools. It's a good idea until it's your child's school, and as you noted, it causes some angst for change. But the board is having a community meeting on Wednesday to discuss repurposing, because certainly folks love J.T. Barber. It's a historical place. There are ways we can have better use of some buildings. I'm not sure how that will go, but they're going to hear some input from the public on Wednesday. And then following that, I have already had conversations with several board members about looking at our plan and how we move forward. And that could be redistricting and saying in that plan that we want to redistrict and have 2 less schools or 3 less schools, and that's what will get us to the place where we need to be. So you're right, that was the start of the conversation.
Commissioner Smith.
I don't want to indicate that I'm trying to tell any board member what to do, but if we're looking at redistricting, would it not be easier to do a total redistrict rather than doing 1 school at the time? Because you know, every time you start a redistrict, you're going to have that same problem.
And that's the
So
exact
why
question I asked the board. Do we want to go through this 4 times or do it all at once? And I think they're leaning toward all at once and then making those changes.
Okay, thank you.
Great point.
Okay. Other questions, comments? I just want to say thank you, Ms. Chair, Ms. Vice Chair, school board members, those that are not here this evening, and to you also, for your communication with us. We are trying to meet on a monthly basis, have the conversation. I think, years ago, Mr. Former Chair. You probably met some, but I think the communication between the Board of Education and Board of Commissioners is better than it's ever been in my tenure on this board, and I appreciate that. It's not because of any one person, it's because of everybody coming together, and we need to be informed of what's going on. It helps us as we're in preparation. We do have, and I want you to understand this today. First, let me say this. Thank you for coming in with your local budget as you did. That helps us, especially during a tax reval year, in which we're trying to, some folks are going to see an increase in their property taxes just because of the value of their property and how much is increased. But our goal is to try to take as much of the burden off of our citizens as we possibly can. And that's what, when we get it to our budget discussions, that's our goal and that's our aim. So you're assisting us by the budget you have presented. But also let me tell you that I think one of my concerns, is I recognize the amount of facility needs we have in this county, and it's enormous. The facilities plan that was presented some years ago when the former superintendent was here, I think we saw numbers of close to $250 million. And when I saw that when it was brought to me at that time, I mean, you know, how in the world can we as citizens of this county afford to fund $250 million? I mean, if we started talking about it, and I'm throwing out a number, nobody hold me to it, but you're talking at least 15 cents more on the tax rate just to cover that. And it may be more, it might be a little less. Having said that, we are concerned as a Board of Commissioners of the facility needs for the future and how we're going to fund that. And I don't want you to go here today, leaving here with any thought that we're trying to beat up on the Board of Education. That's not what we're trying to do. But what we are trying to do, we're trying to figure out, not only for this current board, but future boards, how are the citizens going to fund the facility needs that we have? And what had always been discussed is, one of those areas is to consolidate schools, to try to fix some of these schools that are 50 years old or older maybe. It's an enormous amount of money, and we all know that. It's an enormous amount of money any way you go. So the bottom line is where you find the money. Do you put a bond referendum before the citizens of this county? Sales tax referendum? Nothing's passed across the state to do that. So that's the challenge that we have. It's a concern for the future. And so that's just share our heart with you and where we are. It's not to beat up on you. Yes, we've got concerns. Yes, we need to see something before us, but it will help us in planning for the future. So I ask you to take that away as you have those communications.
Absolutely, and I always appreciate the honest dialogue. That's how we're going to get better, is together. And I appreciate your concerns, and we look forward to bringing something to you about our next steps. I also left with you tonight a little one-pager on every one of our schools. It's celebrations and concerns and how we need to get better and what they're doing to get better, and a little rack card that says some of the things we've done with the money you've provided us. So I will end, if there's no other questions, on thanking you for your commitment to the children of Craven County Schools.
Thank y'all. And school board members, thank y'all for being here this evening too. Thank you. All right. Next, and just to let our citizens know, every year, the first Monday night meeting, the Board of Education comes, the community college comes, and we rotate that every year. Last year, the community college went first and presented their budget, so now they're coming second this year. So Dr. Stats, great to have you, and some of your staff and folks that may be with you, please introduce them. So welcome.
Oh, good evening. It's a pleasure to be with me. My partner tonight is Mr. Jim Millard. He's the Vice President for Administration and the college's Chief Finance Officer. And he's going to spend a little time with you tonight just discussing some of the specific things we've done on our infrastructure at the college in the last year. So tonight, we're going to talk about fiscal 23 as a year in review. And again, Jim will talk to you a little bit about the specific infrastructure projects we've done. And then I'm going to take a little time to talk about our new strategic plan. We're very lucky. I've never worked at an institution where we've done a strategic plan, finished it, and then written a new one. But that's what we've done. And then we'll talk about the 5-year facilities plan, that revolving cycle that we do with you, and our priorities for this next year. And then I'll continue with trends and successes, and finally we'll complete with the county budget. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jim, and he's going to give you the nuts and bolts, literally in this case.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Good evening.
Good evening, Commissioners.
Good evening.
So, next slide, please. And next slide, please. So what we're going to show you is just some of the infrastructure projects that we have completed over the past 12 months. These are projects that are part of our 5-year plan. Dr. Stats will talk about that a little bit more. One of the things that you're looking at here is our new transportation canopy. We've had early college students and our students that go out there every day. This is a big pickup place where they go out there. Different kinds of weather all the time around here. So they basically in the past were standing out there. We really didn't have anywhere for them to go. So this is a project we talked about doing for quite some time, probably a couple of years in planning. Finally got together this year and got the plan moving forward. And this is the result. I'm happy to report that there are a lot of students that are going out there. They like to go out there. We got some tables, some picnic tables. They like to sit out there. And it's also just a great drop-off point. The other day when it was pouring down rain, I noticed it was getting used a lot. So it's a very nice place. I'll talk to you a little bit about the cosmetology lab, aesthetics lab. These are places that we have been, like I said, refurbishing and updating as needed. New chillers is something we work on all the time. Barbering lab, that's actually almost done. We'll talk about the welding lab and VIT. Next slide, please. So on the slides on the left, this is the before. For some of you may have been out to the college before and utilized the cosmetology lab. We try to keep it updated. We try to make sure that it is staying current with what's going on in our community as far as different, places. Make sure they have the right equipment, the right resources available, and that includes also making sure that we stay updated. And I know now that we're getting quite a bit of use out of the cosmetology lab, and now we have the, what am I thinking of? Aesthetics lab also coming. Next slide, please. So the aesthetics lab, this is something that it just keeps growing. We've had quite a bit of change over this. We had not a lot of room, very old building. We finally got a chance to get it redone. We kind of remodeled everything. They used to actually have to carry basins around from different beds to bed with the water. So that was just really not all that good of an idea, and it just really didn't work for them. So now we actually have, it's very, very modern. We have sinks for every one of the beds. It's definitely a much better place to go. Next slide, please. Chillers, these are some of the things that I was telling somebody a while back. These are things that are obviously extremely important to any building that we have. And right now, some of the things that we're looking at is 50 weeks lead time on getting a chiller. 50 weeks. So we're, a lot of times trying to stay on top of that plan, making sure that we keep the preventative maintenance up, because a 50-week lead time, if something goes wrong, is a big problem. So this is just one of the things that we are on top of a lot. This, roofs, and parking lots. Those are big expenses that you've got to stay on top of. Next slide, please. So in our welding labs, which is, by the way, grows in leaps and bounds every time I think we're finally just about there. It's growing again, which is a good thing, but trying to keep the labs up to date and also keep them in the same shape as you would find in a lab out there where they're working. So trying to keep them updated. You can see on the left, it doesn't take long. They start to deteriorate. You got to stay on top of that preventive maintenance. And some of the photos you see on the right is what we were able to do and get those back up into shape. Next slide, please. Same thing. BIT is actually one of the newer buildings we have, and even though it's been around for quite some time, but it's finally starting to get to a point where we need to start doing some upgrades. So we did one floor this year. We'll be doing another floor next year. And this includes anywhere from putting down new tile. And we're also learning a lot of things too. Like some of the stuff we've learned over the years lasts a lot longer than other things. So part of keeping data and keeping track of what's going on is what floors last a little bit longer with the kind of traffic that we're talking. So the floors we're putting in now, we're going to get a lot more mileage out of than we did in the past. Next, please. And Havelock, we did quite a few renovations down there as far as we did a lot of signage and things like that, but also in the restrooms. Like some of these restrooms were the same restrooms, the same way they were when the buildings were first built down in Havelock over a decade ago. So they were in bad need of some upgrades. We got that accomplished in this past 12 months also, and it included everywhere from new tile, new stalls, and also new sinks. Next, please. All right, sir, I think I'm back to you.
And I'll circle back around to the Volt Center here in a few minutes, but we did open up our 5th building on that campus last August. And in that case, we used institutional and state funds, but I think it's worth knowing that we did that. Next slide, please. So I mentioned a strategic plan that we just released, our board approved in March. It covers the years 23 to 28, having completed the 17 to 22 plan. You may recall that our vision statement in the old plan was to be Craven County's first choice for teaching and learning, and we emphasized teaching and learning, of course, mentioned the county because we are a local institution, and that's our priority, but our main thrust was to be first choice. And so these past 5 years, we've worked hard to be the go-to, not only for our students and our industry partners, but also for our community leaders. And we've endeavored to listen and make sure we put those needs into action. And we think we've done a pretty good job of that. So the new vision, still local, still teaching and learning, but now we're drawing our attention to purpose-driven education. And the vision is to draw a straight line that begins with a life or career goal and then work backwards to the actual class lesson that's being taught. And this not only applies to the students who wonder, why am I taking algebra and what am I going to do with this in my life? There is an answer to that question, by the way. But to draw that same line for our faculty, to be able to look at their students and say, the reason I'm teaching this to you today is how you are going to use it in your life, and it actually has an application. And then for our staff to draw a straight line from what they're doing in their staff decisions to that big day on commencement. I've made the joke many times that nobody hugs the payroll clerk on commencement day. But our payroll clerk does know that what she does enables commencement day to happen. And so it's inculcating that understanding and spirit into every action that we do every day that is purpose-driven towards the end goal of teaching and learning. Next slide. So our full goals, or what we call pillars, remain the same from before, but we've put new objectives that are going to cover our priorities over the next 5 years. Teaching and learning remains our core mission. We are an institution of higher education. That's what we do, and we remain focused on that. We try to remain a student-centered experience. Students are first, and persistence and completion are our primary goals for them. We endeavor to have a college environment that is not only a great place to teach and learn, but we hope to be reputed as a great employer, and we take great care of that with our faculty and staff. And finally, as community service and engagement, we endeavor to say yes and to be there when our community needs her, and most important, when we're asked to put those needs into action and make it happen. Next slide. Moving on to our 5-year plan. This is kind of a summary, but I will just take a moment and talk about the big rocks that we're going to be moving over the next 5 years. Chillers, they're not a lot of fun. They take a long time to put in, but if you don't have one, you know very, very quickly. The BIT, or the Business Information Technology Building on the main campus, Ward Hall, which is a 50-year-old building, and Bosch, which is actually only 15, are all due for chillers in the next 4 years. Elevators are the bane of Jim's existence. The Brock elevator is running on Band-Aids and baling wire, and so it in this forthcoming year will be a major project. It'll be over $200,000 to upgrade that elevator. And the only other elevator we have is over in Barker Hall, which is almost as old, and it needs to be upgraded. Underground utilities, it's amazing what you find underground once you start digging. We found that out a couple years ago when a transformer failed, and we really didn't know up until about 5 years ago, or at least the knowledge had been lost, that we're wired in a loop. And by the way, you can go backwards on that loop, but it does cause some phasing issues. So we learned quite a bit about our underground utilities. It's important to keep them up, particularly when you have water intrusion and that type of thing. And finally, the Barker air handler will come up due here in 2028. And as a reminder, our 5-year plan is a revolving plan. So we finished fiscal 23, we're adding fiscal 28. Next year we'll finish 24 and we'll pick up 29. And as needs evolve, we move those projects around. When a transformer fails, we knew that now, even though it was planned for 2 years from now, and then we shuffle that plan. But it is a great method that was worked out with you all about a dozen years ago, and I'm very pleased to say that as of this moment, or knock on wood, we have $0 in deferred maintenance on all of our campuses. Next slide. Next year in particular, we're going to be looking at our corporate training center. This is a new facility we're looking to build using state construction infrastructure funds. We have a master planning study underway with JKF Architecture, about a 12,000 square foot facility that will be primarily flex space, offices, and a catering kitchen, primarily designed to serve industry needs in our local area, to be able to reconfigure that room as necessary to bring major corporations in for training events, do major college activities that we can't currently do. Relative to our size of a college, for example, we were asked to host a statewide event for presidents. We had to say no for lack of space, and it went to Carteret, who is half our size. but they have the space. So we wish to correct that coming forward. Again, BIT refurbishments that Jim mentioned and that Brock Hall elevator will be on the top of our minds. Multi-campus, always doing HVAC upgrades in this next year. Roof preventative maintenance, we have a lot of flat roofs. In fact, they're all flat. And so they have their own special needs. Keeping them repaired, parking lots, it's rough on parking lots, especially when you drive a tractor trailer on one. And then, of course, paintings and groundkeeping. Next slide. This is a big one. I'm pleased to report, I believe we have one or more of our aldermen with us tonight, that last Tuesday night, the New Bern aldermen unanimously approved a 20-year lease for the completion of the Volt Center. With that lease and the Golden Leaf grant of $495,000, we expect to open buildings 6 and 7 on that campus sometime in the next year, heavy equipment operations, and a small business light manufacturing incubator. It seems weird to have this as our expiration date, but it's May 31st, 2043. But it's great. We've had a wonderful partnership with the city, with the county, with the state, and I'll mention that a little bit more of that in a few minutes. We've also had some work to do with you as well. Last fall, you all approved a 20-year lease for us to begin construction of a public safety training center. That lease goes through December of 2042. Master campus planning study is underway. We're in final negotiations with the architect that will be putting that plan together. And we're going to spend the next few months working that plan to make sure that where we decide to site the firing range isn't the same site that we want to put the fire tower. They don't mix real well. So we're going to make sure that we do that right the first time and have an architect do that planning for us. Next slide. This is our enrollment trends over the last 10 years. Relatively stable. We've only varied in single digits over the past 10 years. We're a little bit smaller than we were, about 7.5%, 3,200 FTE to 3,000. But what's important to note about that is the difference in the way that 10% or 3,000 FTE is configured. We have doubled our nursing program. We have increased our applied programs by at least 25%. Workforce development is 25% bigger. And our online population has gone from 38% on our traditional courses, think university transfer before the pandemic, to what appears to be sustained at 53% online. So many of these different programs require a lot more space than they used to. Nursing takes a lot of space, much more than a classroom featuring Emily Dickinson or a calculus class, which is what I used to teach. A machining class is single purpose only. When you put that big machine there and you run 8 students through, it's not reused the rest of the day. We can convert an English class to a math class, however, in that same space. So while we've gone down just a little bit, our space needs have grown, and you've accommodated us throughout the last 10 years or so as we've built the Volt Center, built the STEM Center, and now the Public Safety Training Center. Next slide. It's been a big year for accomplishments. I can't overstate enough the accomplishment of receiving the National League of Nursing accreditation. This was a decade-long effort. The key piece for us was finding master's qualified nurses to do clinical experiences. 5 years ago, we couldn't do it, and we were not accredited. A lot of hard work and sweat went into doing that, and we got it done last year. And the impact to our community is that our graduates are now eligible for immediate Department of Defense and Veterans Administration employees. They must be graduates of an NLN-accredited school. In the past, they would have to go on to their bachelor's degree before they could attain those jobs. Now they can directly. Our emergency medical technician is in its accreditation process. I cannot begin to pronounce that acronym, but that's the accrediting body. We have what is referred to as a letter of review, which allows us to admit our first cohort of credentialed paramedics. This is a new accreditation requirement that didn't exist a few years ago, and we are upgrading to stay current with the needs. We completed our SAC COC 5th year report. That's the mid-cycle review for the decennial. We'd been hoping that this meant we were going to breathe for a couple years before we had to go back into reaffirmation. If you're keeping current with state legislation right now, there's a bill in the Senate that, if passed, will require us to switch our accreditors before the end of the cycle, which means we go back into reaffirmation probably this fall. My institutional effectiveness chief is not pleased, but she'll get hard at work right away. Finally, we opened the Volt Center kitchen. Some of you will taste some of their wares at the forthcoming North Carolina Symphony that will be taking place next 2 weeks, excuse me. I won't be there, and I'll explain on my next slide. Next slide. And that is because the Volt Center. I will be having the honor of briefing the State Board of Community Colleges on May 18th about our Volt Center. Not only the accomplishments here, but as a statewide model for workforce development. So I will unfortunately miss the symphony and our students, but I will be engaging with our state board and telling them what's been accomplished with the Volt Center over the last years. It is unique among its peers. It is the Dallas Herring legacy in action. which is the idea that we go to our students where they are and we carry them as far as they wish to go. Remember, the Volt Center is a majority population of students with 20% walking to that facility. That has made a huge difference in our community. I always feel good and bad about this list of partners because I know I'm missing people. There are so many, it is beyond count, but you can look at some of the logos there and you see some of our partners right here in the room that we've worked with. Next slide. The most important student outcome is what they do after they graduate. And we have worked hard to track our students that are graduating immediately upon employment, and that number is 765 since May of 2019. And I've started putting a date on this because that number changes every so often. Those of you familiar with military recruiting traditions, you know that when you recruit a new person, you ring a bell. We have a bell on the whiteboard at the Volt Center, and every time that board is updated, the staff rings that bell to let folks know that another student has found a job coming out of the Volt Center. I've had some great quotes. We had a listening session with some of our aldermen a couple weeks ago, and I have his permission to quote him, but Mr. David Deisinger from Bosch said to the group that if it had not been for the Volt Center's pipeline, Bosch would not have survived the last 3 years. Moen reports that when they were using a temp agency, they would interview 100, hire 10, and keep 1. Their 3-month retention rate is now over 90%. So it is making a difference. Finally, our budget request. So I'll give you the good news. I pass the plate next. So we start with the baseline allocation of last year. We are anticipating good news from the legislature of salary increases, but remember that we do our salary increase request to you in arrears. So this reflects last year's salary increase, which was up at 3.5%. Retirement continues to go up. As expensive as that is, I am glad to know that North Carolina's retirement system, though, is essentially fully funded. I've worked in systems where it's not, but it does cost money. Health insurance and 2 positions to account for the increased footprint, both at Havelock and at the Volt Center. This is custodial and maintenance. Our operating request, almost all of that is utility cost. We've endured some utility increases in the last year. And I've left a blank just to kind of give a heads up that there may be a small request next year once we get the heavy equipment operations facility going and the small business center incubator going, that we may have some utility costs associated with that. Facilities in terms of custodial and maintenance should be sufficient to cover those 2 new buildings. Our capital allocation has been identical since fiscal 15. Which gives us a total request of just north of $5 million, or just shy of a 5% increase request. And I'm ready for your questions.
All right, Commissioners, if we will, Commissioner Mitchell, you serve on the Community College Board of Trustees. You have anything you want to say, questions?
I'd like to congratulate the staff at the community college for weathering Florence, COVID, changing workforce dynamics, and providing the training and education both to keep industry here and to get our citizens jobs moving forward to improve their lives. So y'all done an outstanding job.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Vice Chair Booker.
It's exciting to see the vocational, I'll use that word, I don't know if that's the right word or not, but the vocational piece of what you guys do compared to when I first got here 23 years ago. I'm on the board of the hospital, and nurses are an incredible challenge for us. And the shortage is nationwide. It's not just here, it's everywhere. And the fact that you guys have now the ability to graduate nurses and put them right into our facility is huge. The traveling nurses,
horrible.
I could go on, but the nurses, they do this, This nurse goes here, and then this nurse goes here, and they get paid megabucks for traveling, when in some cases they still go home to their own bed every night. It's a major problem, and nursing, to me, is one of the key things that you guys are doing that are important.
It's good that you mentioned Carolina East, and I'll take a moment to mention the partnership with them. One of the warts and I believe our finance system at the state level is probably the best I've been in. I've been in several other states. It works well, but one of the warts that goes with it is you earn FTE based on your students you've had in the past 2 years. What that means is when you're starting new programs or expanding new programs, you don't get the funding for the faculty for those programs until 2 years later. And that can be a hit. Carolina East stepped up to the plate. Ray Leggett at that time, and now Michael Smith said, hey, we need more nurses. Can you produce more? Okay, this is my problem. He said, well, we'll fix that. We'll pay for that nursing instructor for the first 2 years. And so they did, and we increased our output from 40 to 60. And they liked what they saw, and they said, well, can we do this again? And I said, by all means, let's do it. Then we ran out of clinical space, so we put our heads together and said, well, if we offset cohorts, instead of always bringing them all in the fall, we'll bring half in the fall and half in the spring. We can offset the clinical requirements, and we can fit more through the system. So this year we put through our first, what we call dual cohort entry, and next year we'll graduate 80 nurses. So we have doubled, but it's been because Carolina East provided the funding for us to overcome that little funding hiccup that makes it tough to expand a program. And then in 2025, we'll be getting the FTE, and those will be self-paying positions. So it's a great partnership.
The goal of this board, one of the many goals, is economic development. And for us to bring in companies who come in, maybe build a facility or take an existing facility and need these technically skilled people. And when I say technically skilled, anywhere from diesel mechanics to people that can cook. It is critical that your facility continues to do what it's doing. So we appreciate that. That's important.
You have any?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Moore.
I guess I've been around here longer than 5 years, and I know Dr. Stats and what he has done in the way of providing our employees and our economic benefit, especially I'm on the board, hospital board with Commissioner Booker. What you did in the way of nursing, I can't say it's been great, and we hope to see more out of you. But thank you very much.
Thank you.
Commissioner Smith.
I would like to say something. As all of you know, I'm in the seat of Mr. Johnny Sampson. And I have for many years been on that other side of the room, and I've heard him speak to the need for vocational education in high school and community college. And I've heard him say so many times, we need to do this. So I'm not expressing exactly what he said, but he said a man needs to be able to feed his family. And these are jobs. These are educational facilities that are making people job ready. And that is what he spoke to so often in this very room. So I know wherever he is, I think he's maybe in heaven looking down at us. I know he is happy to know that Craven County is now having many, many people job ready and being able to progress and feed their families and move forward.
Miss Ethel's watching us.
Yes.
Commissioner Hunt, do you have anything else here? Not, gentlemen, thank you so much for your presentation. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
One more item before we recess under departmental matters. We wanted to do that while we had our school folks here. This is the Public School Building Capital Fund application. Mr. Craig Warren, our Finance Director. And we got Ms. Denise here too. If there's any questions that we need to, she can chime in. So,
big guns in the house, right?
Yeah.
Good evening, Commissioners. I got one item of business for you to consider tonight, and that is the Public School Building Capital Fund application. Each year, both the Board of Education and the Board of County Commissioners jointly approve a project application to be submitted to the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction. This application is required in order to draw down the lottery proceeds that have been allocated to Craven County by the state in the Public School Building Capital Fund. These funds are restricted and can only be used towards school construction projects or to retire school debt as a result of the construction projects. So in your agendas is the application. The amount on the application is approximately $2.8 million, and that was the current year's debt service that was used. So the lottery proceeds that we will receive will go towards that.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Warren? No questions. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the application for the Public School Building Capital Fund. Any discussion on the motion? Hear none, Madam Clerk, if you will, please call the roll.
Commissioner Mitchell,
Yes.
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Commissioner Howard,
Yes.
Commissioner Hunt,
Yes.
Commissioner Mark,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Booker,
Yes.
Chairman Jones.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Craig. Sometimes I fail to recognize, I think we might have some leadership, Craven. Do we have folks here? You want to stand and we want to recognize you. You can say your name, please, sir.
Eric Thompson with Thompson Oak Grove.
Glad to have you. Yes, any others? If not, and also, Mr. Alderman Brinson, it's always good to have you, sir, and we failed to recognize you, so thank you for being in attendance. Again, to those that have made presentations this evening, thank you. We appreciate what you do. We're going to take a 10-minute recess, and then we'll come back and reconvene. While she's pulling that up, Commissioners, do you have, any of you have any more pending? All right, we're going to go to current.
There are 2 seats.
There are 2 seats. Ms. Summer Bajork, she is the new information. Jack, go ahead.
He's the environmental health educator for Coastal Regional Solid Waste Management Authority.
So I think it's a great application to have her on Clean Sweep. You don't have it before you. If there are objections, we can wait till the next meeting, but would there be?
No, I recommend we appoint her.
Okay, we got the nomination of Ms. Summer Bajork.
Second.
All right, are there additional nominations from the board? Hear none, well, we set it by acclamation since there are no additional nominations. Please take note, Commissioners, that there is one more appointment for that. And so I think we heard Commissioner Hunt say she might have somebody to bring back at the next meeting also. No more pending. All right, we'll go now to current. First item is Community Child Protection Team. We have been asked to defer that this evening. Is there any objection from Commissioners? Hear no objection, we will now move to Craven County Recreation Advisory Council. You have a District 5. They wish to be reappointed. Commissioner Hunt?
I would reappoint.
Okay, we have a nomination of George. Are there any other nominations from the board? Hear none, we will accept by acclamation. Next would be the Craven Community College Board of Trustees. You have Mr. Irvin Patrick, who was appointed in 2019, lives in District 2. He seeks reappointment. That is the district in which I live in. I would ask that he be reappointed. Are there other nominations from the board? Hear none, we would accept Mr. Patrick by acclamation. Fire Tax Commissioners, you have first Mr. John Hawkins from Township 3, Coast City. Again, that is in the township, the district in which I live. I would ask for his reappointment. Are there additional nominations? Hear none, we accept Mr. Hawkins by acclamation. Next, you have Mr. Chad Anderson, Township 8, Commissioner Mitchell.
Yes, I recommend his reappointment.
Okay, we have a nomination of Mr. Anderson. Are there any others? Hear none, we accept by acclamation. And then the next one does not, Mr. Bart does not seek reappointment, so please take note of that. Next, you have the JCPC. Mr. Clint Rowe, his seat has been vacated. Judge Walter Mills seeks appointment.
I recommend we appoint him.
Okay, we have a nomination of Judge Walter Mills. Is there any additional nominations? Here none, we accept by acclamation. And then next, you have Stacy Huss, the court counselor, seeks reappointment to that.
I will reappoint that.
Okay, we have a nomination of Ms. Huss. Are there any additional? Here none, we will accept by acclamation. You see there the terms expiring in June. Please take note of that. Commissioners, are there any additional appointments to bring before the board this evening? Here none, we will now move to the county attorney's report. Mr. Grady.
Mr. Chairman, I have no report this evening.
Okay, thank you, sir. All right, next is the petition of citizens, general topics. I think the vice chair said at the beginning of the meeting that we do have a number of citizens who have signed up for that. Again, as we always say, we appreciate those that come and speak to the board. We do have a timekeeper of 3 minutes. We ask that you, if you would, please abide by that. Also, when you come to the podium, if you would, please state your name and address for the record. We would appreciate that. So I turn it over to the vice chair.
Okay, the first speaker would be Austin Anderson.
Ladies and gentlemen, first, thank you for having me here. after listening to this. There are a whole bunch of important topics that y'all are talking about. This is completely insignificant compared to what you've been talking to, but it's of great importance to me. So I do own a house in Havelock.
Excuse me, would you give your
Full name?
full name and address, please?
Austin Anderson at 112 Patriot Court. I don't live there currently. Currently, I am down in South Carolina. I'm a Marine officer at Parris Island with orders to come back here to Cherry Point.
Thank you for your service.
Thanks for your service.
Thank you. So my issue here that's made it nigh on impossible to find a place to live around here is the animal ordinances. Currently, I'm 0 for 50 in places to live that I've looked at. And that is because about 2 years ago, me working 80 to 120 hours a week, I wanted like a friend for my dog, essentially is what it was. So I ended up getting a dwarf fainting goat. And she's about 19 inches tall, 55 pounds, doesn't even know she's a dog, or a goat, sorry, she thinks she's a dog. That's the thing. Yeah, so she thinks she's a dog.
Yeah, okay.
But yeah, so she's provided great emotional support to me and all of my companions at work, my Marines, my neighbors. I live in an HOA. She was voted in unanimously. Everybody loves her so much. I feel like she's less destructive than most animals, especially dogs. But the city ordinances and quite a few cities around here state that livestock is illegal to own, and then the cities have the ability to, without warning or notice, impound and destroy the animal. And I think that's kind of bizarre, especially since horses, chickens, and pigs are allowed within city limits, but goats are not. Goats are less noisy, they're less nuisances, and they're definitely less smelly and nasty. Grew up in a small farm in Florida, and I lived with all of those animals. But yeah, she is essentially a house pet. She lives outside during the day, sleeps in a kennel in the garage at night. So she doesn't even know she's a goat. Sometimes she barks at people, but that's about it. She plays with children and other dogs very well. So what exactly I'm looking for, I don't know, besides an exception to a city ordinance for a house pet that means a lot to me, from laws that I think might have been made a long time ago, but don't make so much sense to me, but it's kind of what I'm dealing with right now. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for
Thank
your
you, sir.
time. But
We don't normally respond, but I own 4 goats. So I feel your pain. My goats are not in the city limits, obviously. And I concur. They're sweet animals, so.
Sir, and what I'm dealing with, Dad, and anything I find outside of city limits is got covenants.
You're in the city of Havelock. Have you approached that city council regarding this?
I emailed the county administrator who said that's a decision made by the Board of County Commissioners. So I drove up here from South Carolina to talk to you all tonight.
Can I ask this in respect of the time? Ms. Lauren Morgo, if you will walk out those doors, one of our staff members is going to meet you, and she can assist you if you don't mind.
I appreciate that,
Thank
sir.
you. Appreciate it.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Next speaker is Barb Huddle.
That's the easy thing there.
All right, good evening, Commissioners.
Good evening.
In an email to the county leaders dated...
Excuse me, would you give your name and
Oh, I'm
address,
sorry.
please?
Barbara Tuttle, 17B Masters Court Drive in Riverbend. Okay.
Thank you.
In an email to the county leaders dated July 26, 2021, the health director stated the following. To the issue around reporting and the reporting software, several years ago when Trinity Smith was the shelter manager, we used an advanced version of Pet Point software, which had some additional reporting capability. Once Miss Elma Green took over as the manager, she was not fond of Pet Point and moved to another software called Shelter Pro. When Eileen Benson took over as the shelter manager, she suggested a switch back to the base model of Pet Point, which would be less expensive and provide us with all of the state-required reports and all of the reporting capabilities she felt was necessary for the shelter. Therefore, we now have a base point model of Pet Point. The base model of Pet Point allows the operator to access the information put into the generated reports. That is the purpose of Pet Point, to help account accurately for animals and animal shelters. No report was received by the citizens in this county from Pet Point to Shelter Pro since 2016. From 2016 to date, all reports generated by the shelter are not Pet Point reports at all. In fact, in an email dated October 2022, county attorney stated, "Your request for a monthly printout from the 24 Pet Watch program, no such records currently exist." Currently, however, the county is voluntarily providing a monthly report to which includes Pet Watch data. Now have we changed programs yet again? Pet Point Basic, Pet Point Advanced, Shelter Pro, and now Pet Watch? Are we doing this annually? If so, why? Yet, if we are worried about a less expensive model as stated, then why did we change the reporting program that was thoroughly, only to have the county finance department, the county shelter director, and the county health director involved in putting together another separate report? Please note, Ms. Elma Green was the director at the time our county reported to the state, which shows over 1,600 animals missing. When Mrs. Beeson took over, there were declarations of never-before-seen adoptions that have yet to be verified. Thousands of animals. Again, since 2016, no report has been provided to the citizens, has been generated by any actual shelter program. Why? This is 2023. You should be able to have produced records on computers. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Next person, Sandra Barta.
Sandra Barta, 404 Gatewood Drive, New Bern. Well, here I am again. We've been coming to this board with a plethora of questions and facts that all of you have ignored. Mr. Jones here said that he answers the questions of the people that come before, if I'm not mistaken, the last meeting. Yet, not one of us who have ever come before this board and asked questions has ever received an answer. Let me remind you again, for at least the third time, probably more, but I'm saying 3. A dog that did not receive any recorded vet care while in the shelter for 9 days with a broken leg. Another dog, instead of being taken to a vet immediately, was taken to the shelter per policy, and an SOS was placed on Facebook to get vet help the next day. The limb needed amputation. Another dog that did not see a vet immediately upon being picked up, but according to the laws that y'all made, had to be taken to the shelter prior to it going to a vet, okay? That dog, in fact, had to be euthanized due to its pain and suffering because under the laws that y'all created, he could not be taken to a daggone vet before going to the shelter. Dozens of case animals that sat in our shelter for over 500 days, according to the health director, because the shelter director never, ever petitioned the court for reimbursement, let alone the release of custody for the animals. According to North Carolina General Statute 19A70, only the shelter draw operator can petition the court for this purpose. It hasn't been done since February of 2020. Our county did an internal audit at which time no income was included for owned animals not reported to the state at $25 per animal. According to shelter reports, there have been a few hundred of these animals euthanized in the past. Exactly where is that income? Where's it being reported? This is money. This is my money. This is taxpayer money that I'm paying as long as everybody else coming in here for this shelter. Our county it is pointed out that animals have been turned away from our county shelter yet again, and we don't know how many, according to the county attorney, because no such report exists. Since cats are only allowed to be taken in on Tuesdays and Thursdays, well, where in the heck are these cats going to go when somebody's coming to the shelter? Oh, no, can't be here if it's not a Tuesday or Thursday. I know this for a fact because I got cats delivered to my house that I had to find a place for because the shelter wouldn't accept them. Numerous times it's been asked what rescue CPAS has been utilizing. To date, where's that information? It's not private. I'm not asking for somebody's personal information. It's every time they're going to a shelter, they're going to rescue, they're going to this. Well, you know, what rescue? Give us some information here. Okay, it's also been questioned that the health department has put into place an emergency plan in the event of another hurricane due to the fiasco during and after Hurricane Florence. Haven't received a response. Just letting you know, I'll be back.
Next speaker is Chris Bartow.
Chris Barta, 404 Gatewood. You guys seen me before. Some of the laws that you obviously are supposed to abide by or you're not at the shelter. North Carolina General Statute 19A, 02, NCAC 52J. Animal shelters shall maintain records required by the Animal Welfare Act or this subchapter for a period of 3 years after the disposition of an animal. When requested for the documentation, we were told no records exist, none. 3 years. Sick, diseased, injured, lame, blind dogs, cats shall be provided veterinary care in a timely manner, as spoken before, or be euthanized, provided that the euthanization shall not affect compliance with a state or local law requiring holding periods specified of animals suspected of being diseased. If an animal cannot be euthanized due to the control requirements or restrictions, there's supposed to be adequate veterinary care. Obviously, it's not happening, okay? That's part of the law. Full written disclosure of the medical condition of the animal and all veterinary medical treatment provided to the animal shall be provided to the person or organization receiving, adopting, purchasing, or otherwise acquiring the animal. Proof of written disclosure signed by the person, organization receiving the animal shall be maintained as part of the animal's record. Again, those records must be kept for 3 years. We again asked for those documentations. We were told the county is not in possession of these reports. I don't know how they're not. That's your shelter. Rescue organizations means a nonprofit corporate cooperation or association that cares for stray animals that has been favorably assessed by the operator of the animal shelter through the application of written standards. For the purpose of the GS 19A, written standards for approved rescue organizations shall include but not be limited to the application process, sanitation protocols, daily observation of animals, feeding, watering of the animals, provisions and documentation of veterinary care of the shelter's animal, provisions and documentation of human and same species interaction, exercise, play, environmental enrichment for shelter animals in long-term care at the rescue, requirements for inspections by the shelter and compliance by the rescue with the North Carolina Welfare Act and its rules issued pursuant thereto. We are told when we ask for that, this information has not been compiled by the health department, so no responsive documentation was available. Also, renewal applications for license and registration, statement of presence of an emergency or disaster plan of the facility. All licensed and registered facilities must develop and maintain a plan of action. For that reason, no response was made by the county. Thank you.
Next speaker is Tiger Gonzalez.
Hi, Tiger Gonzalez, 125 Turkey Quarter Creek Road, Cove City, North Carolina, 28523. As you all are aware, 3 out of our 4 animal protection officers have submitted their resignations. Thousands of Craven County residents will ask why. I think you all have forgotten the hundreds of instances complete with photos of animal cruelty and neglect that were ignored by the all animal control under the health department. One that I reported over and over again was totally dismissed, went on to attack a child, scarring him mentally and physically for life. Our county was responsible for that. If anyone called for animal control in this county before APS, you would be lucky if you even got a call back, let alone anybody showing up. That changed in 2019 with the formation of APS services under the sheriff and APS Director Rogers. Since that time, it has been an all-out war with the shelter due to the health department's flexing its muscle and trying to hold on to their old regime. Much of the flexing has been supported by this board. We have shown you law after law that has been broken, lies and false reports that have been submitted, proved animal neglect that was due to our county shelter's negligence, missing or no reports with state-mandated operations, and it goes on and on. Still, this board has done absolutely nothing. In fact, the county continues to rehire and utilize those who have been proven to be responsible for most of this mess. I was asked to forget some of these issues by county leaders, but to be perfectly honest, I never forgot what was done to our farmers by this county, and I will not forget what is done to these animals. At least the farmers could speak for themselves. Every one of these mentioned issues has one common denominator: the health director. Even though we have gathered almost 8,000 handwritten and electronic signatures to move the shelter under the sheriff, once again the citizens are ignored. So I'll tell you what, just give animal control back to the health department and we will direct once again ignored citizens to call this board. It is crystal clear the health department still wants it all to aid in covering their mess and to retain total control. I know I speak for thousands when I say thank you so very much to our APS officers for being what APS should be despite this turmoil. Because of these officers, so many animals were given second chances in the past that were immediately euthanized. I was lucky enough to adopt one, and our sheriff was lucky enough to adopt another one. One last point I would like to make. When this county gave me a copy of its own audit, I noticed 60 animals were given away at no charge. Under reason for no charge, the county states heartworm-positive dogs, and then 4 nursing kittens and 10 feral cats to a local citizen for their barn, and keying errors. So are all dogs at our shelter that have heartworms free now? Are all feral cats free and even unweaned? Funny how we are counting unweaned kittens here, but do not count it with the state. Not that I am complaining, I just want to get it straight. Were these animals spayed or neutered according to our county ordinance so we don't end up with more unwanted dogs with heartworms and more feral cats? Politics is an evil game, one that I will not play. Right is right, wrong is wrong, and no matter what justifications this county continues to use, I'm not doing it.
Next speaker is Lauren Carver.
My name is Lauren Carver. I'm the founder of Project North Carolina. We are based at 200 North Williams Street, Suite 893 in Goldsboro, North Carolina, and we service the entire state of North Carolina in assisting citizens like these with these sort of matters. Greetings, commissioners and great citizens of Craven County. I would like to address the financials brought up at the last meeting. We were able to identify that the amount reported to the North Carolina Department of Agriculture in 2021 was the proposed budget and not what was actually spent. So we were able to reconcile what appeared to be missing money. We were able to locate it after extensive research into the county budgets and other documents that we had available online. It appears in 2022, considerations have been made not to cause that level of confusion again, which we appreciate. What we cannot reconcile is that donations to the shelter are not being accounted for in the annual county reports. According to the county, since 2018, only $700 have ever been collected under donations and miscellaneous donations. We have a source claiming to help with the shelter's social media page that they've raised thousands of dollars through the Craven County Health Foundation. Why is that not being recorded and accounted for the budget? Expect another FOIA soon. We still know donations had to have been received in some capacity. Why are donations and grants not being accounted for? We also cannot reconcile the ongoing attitude towards 1,600 plus missing animals or more and multiple cases of neglect being considered old matters and entirely disregarded with silence and inaction until Fred. It is in Fred's name and 1,600 plus like him that we are here, despite insurmountable and sufficient evidence to this board, to hold someone responsible and yet retired with full benefits that the county's still paying for? How many of those missing animals went to rescue like Fred did? It's not old if it never gets addressed, it's unfinished business. These are just the incidents we know about. That is no one's fault but the county's. Do not continue to blame these citizens for holding you accountable for your agencies when you do not. Denial for eligible public record requests without lawful explanation for why the material is ineligible by your lawyer, which we have been told is eligible for dissemination to the public by the North Carolina Freedom of Information Coalition. Lists are materials not compiled by the Health Department and therefore do not exist. Make them compile the list as they are required to by the public records law. What do you have to hide and what do you have to lose by moving this department into capable hands? Ms. Gonzalez and others keep you on your toes because it's their job to do so as citizens. The citizens are your CEOs, and the power is in the hands of the people and not governments. Do not forget your place. If in God you trust, may God convict you to do the right thing. Man's first job on earth was to care for God's creation. We will echo their voices, and we hope that you echo their voices because our voices are their voices, and so are yours. Thank you.
Next speaker, Barbara Tuttle.
Yes.
Well, Barbara Tuttle's got her name down here twice.
I only signed one piece.
You want to go again? I'll give you mine.
Very good. Bob Griswold.
Thank you. Robert Griswold, 4807 Delft Drive, New Bern, North Carolina. I hereby ask the county commissioners to add an agenda item concerning the status of the Craven County Animal Shelter and the welfare of the animals under their care. Last month, a number of persons spoke before the board concerning the conditions at the shelter and the care and treatment of the animals at the facility. Our understanding is that the commissioners have continued the current control and accountability of the shelter. As previously requested, I again ask for an accounting of the animals and the status of the facility since last month's request. This includes intake, continuing care, resolutions of these animals. I also ask for an accounting of the veterinary care required for these animals. As we, the public, are looking for improvement in care and accountability at the facility, this request seems reasonable, appropriate, and timely. I thank you for addressing this concern. Thank you.
That's it.
Thank you, sir. All right, County Manager's report, Mr. White.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Two quick things. I wanted to say, you heard some budget requests tonight. You had your two big ones, your Board of Education and Community College. On May 15th, I will present the county recommended budget, my recommended budget to you, and we'll begin budget workshops, I think, later that day and on through the week, and as needed, moving forward based on the pace of how that goes the first week. And I also just wanted to say publicly a huge thank you to three people who worked tirelessly during the Great Lakes fire, which many of you knew. I think everybody saw the smoke and the ash. You couldn't be anywhere in Craven County without seeing it. But I want to thank Amber Parker, who worked, I believe, straight for about 4 days, making sure the public information was out, coordinating with our federal and state partners who were here to address the fire. And again, I think she did a fantastic job. And last week it culminated with a public meeting. I believe it was Wednesday night at Creekside Elementary, and I can say it was well attended and well done. There is a video of that meeting on our Facebook page if anybody cares to look. I also want to thank our team over in Emergency Services, Ira Whitford, Stanley Kite. They are true professionals. Watching them work in this type of environment. I happened to just be nosy Saturday when it was kind of flaring up, and I was riding somewhere I wasn't, and guess who I run into is Stanley out there in the field doing his thing. So we're very proud to have those as part of our Craven team, and we've also had a great team here, and Amber's going to help me. It was a Southern Regional Incident Management team that comes in. They're called the Red Team. They were here for about 10 days. They did a fantastic job. Those folks train all year for Type 1 storms like this, Type 1 incidents like this, and some of them will be departing, I believe, today and tomorrow, but another team will be behind them to fill in the gaps. But just wanted to give a board an update on that. And, Mr. Chairman, that's all unless there's questions for me.
Any questions for the county manager?
Yeah, thank you. Jack, could you add, kind of give folks a little bit of information as to why this thing is so stubborn and hard to put out?
Yeah. So there's a great video that explains some of the natural features of the Croatan forest, right? It's a Pocosin, which is interesting, and I had to learn a lot about this as we worked through this fire. But basically, instead of the fire being on the surface, it's actually underground. It's underground. Mm-hmm. And depending on the water table, so how much rain we've had over the last year or two, depends on how much of the material you have underground. So it can go anywhere from 1 foot to 12 foot. Mm-hmm. And the water table can be anywhere from 1 foot to 12 foot in there. So as it gets drier, there's more material to burn, and this thing will creep underground until you basically have some type of tropical moisture, is what we're hearing, that will soak, it's kind of, imagine a sponge. Right now it's dry. When it rains, it fills that sponge up, which then makes the water table higher, virtually allowing the fire to have nowhere to go. So right now, surface fires pretty well handled, I think, managed. It's the underground thing we'll be probably looking at for several months, having to monitor and maintain some eyes on that.
And from what I understand, they've done a pretty effective job of circling to keep it from spreading from where it's at.
Absolutely. That's a good point. 45% contained. That was the last report. I believe that was yesterday. That's up from 30% earlier, late last week. The problem you have is once you get to about the 45 or 50%, there are some areas of the forest where they cannot take in heavy equipment. It's simply too soft for the equipment. It sinks, and basically you spend more time digging it out than doing good. So,
thank you.
But they've got what I would say in that 45%, it is the areas that were critical to protect land outside the forest, if that makes sense.
Jack, it did look like 49% is the current containment as of this afternoon.
49% now.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Commissioners report. Commissioner Mitchell, you want to start?
Nothing to report.
Okay. Commissioner Howell? Good. Okay. Commissioner Hunt?
Yes. I would like to thank Jasmine Kennedy. She works downstairs, and she went out to Havelock High School, and I joined her and a little over 100 other students to commit to making a prom promise, which is to stay safe and sober, not just over the prom weekend, but throughout the summer. That was a lot of fun, and I hope I get invited back to the high school again.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioner Smith?
Yes. I am planning a town hall meeting on Monday, May 8th, for District 3, and I hope that all of you will show up. District 3 and anybody else that want to come. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Moore?
It's going to be, may I say, finish?
Yes.
I did not say. The meeting will be at the George Street Center, and it is 811 George Street. It's the senior building down the street.
Anything else, Commissioner Smith?
That's it, thank you.
I have nothing to report, Chairman.
Vice Chair?
Nothing.
All right, I have nothing. Anything else to bring before the Board of Commissioners this evening? Hearing nothing, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Move.
I have a motion and a second. Discussion on the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.